Okay, brilliant. Let's get started. Fred, if you could keep your eye on the waiting room and let people in, that'd be great. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon to this webinar. We're going to be talking about re-entry and apprenticeship today. Specifically, we're going to talk about the Restart grant opportunity. We've got some brilliant partners here. Chase Sackett from New America is going to kick us off in a minute with a bit of context on the policy and the politics. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the grant opportunity, what it looks like, why we should care about it from an apprenticeship perspective. Then we've got a really fantastic panel of experts that's the real meat and potatoes of the webinar who are going to talk about the real world experience of using apprenticeships for re-entry. So we've got Jeff Brownrich from the Peter Green Project, Nadine Phillips from the Centre of Employment Opportunities, and Kevin McCracken, The Last Mile. So we'll have some time at the end for questions with that panel. So if you've got any questions as we're going through today, please put them in the sidebar. We'll try and get to them at the end. Otherwise, we'll be recording this. We'll put this on our YouTube channel afterwards, and we'll share the slides out. So no need to take any notes. Okay, brilliant. So we're going to start up front talking about the Restart grant. Chase, I'm going to hand over to you for a bit of context in a second. But firstly, just a quick note from me about AFA's interest here. So you know we've come to this area because there's a funding opportunity for apprenticeship here, as with a lot of things at the moment. The administration are using a grant to meet multiple goals. They've got goals on re-entry and goals on meeting 1 million registered apprenticeship. So we care about this from that perspective. But we at AFA, we've also seen apprenticeship being a really effective model for helping re-entry, reintegration. Personally, I've seen apprenticeship used for currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people in the UK really effectively. So there's a great model there, but it comes with lots of complexities, specific challenges. So that's why we're pleased to have such a great panel here today. Okay, Chase, I'm going to pass over to you to give us a bit of context on the policy and the politics here.
Great. Thanks so much, Harry. I really appreciate y'all's partnership at Apprenticeships for America. So I'll just highlight a couple of things about the Restart grants because it essentially, from my perspective, represents the combination of two different things that the administration has been prioritizing. One of these is apprenticeships, obviously, as AFA and others have illustrated. The administration has really emphasized apprenticeships, whether that's in Workforce Pell, the pay for performance apprenticeships, et cetera. So no surprise to folks on this call. The other thing is that the administration has expressed a real interest in supporting justice-involved populations, and actually included some great language on this point in the recent America's Talent Strategy document between the Departments of Education, Labor, and Commerce that I'll drop in here just for your reference. So from our perspective, this is kind of a natural combination of work that the administration is trying to do and thinking about how to restructure this long-running reentry employment opportunities grant to provide more of an emphasis on apprenticeships. The REO program, or Reentry Employment Opportunities Program, which is the sort of broader umbrella that the Restart grant falls under, has been around for quite a while. There have been a set of different grants aimed at different populations. In the past, apprenticeships has been something that's been recommended or allowed, but has not been emphasized nearly as much as in this Restart grant award. So this is something we're excited to see and very curious to see how it will turn out in terms of expanding the pipeline for apprenticeships and directly supporting them as well. So I'll turn it back to you, Harry. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chase. Freddie, can we get the slides up? Okay, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the grant, how it works for apprenticeship, what people need to think about. If we could start on slide 3, I think it was ready. Sorry, we're just having some technical issues. Okay. Sorry, just give us a second. We're just getting the slides up. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So this just lays out the goals of the grant, exactly as Chase mentioned. As you can see, um, apprenticeships is front and center here. It's a key component of the grant, that third goal there. If we could just skip to the next slide. This goes over the grant in a nutshell. So funding wise, there's at least 81 million available. We've got the prospect of additional funding later down the line. So there's a further 110 million appropriation in the FY26 financial year. In terms of how that money is going to be spent, DOL has specified at least 30 million of that is going to go to national or regional intermediaries who are serving youth, either youth or young adults. And then the remainder of that, so up to 51 million, will go to states, territories, and tribes. 42-month performance period. We've got 6 priority sectors. Keen eyes will notice we've got similar priorities to some of the other DWell grants that are getting issued at the moment. So the PFP apprenticeship grant that came out recently, although described in a slightly different way. If we could go ahead to the next slide, please. So just digging into who the grant serves, we've got 3 different groups: youth, young adults, adults. Obvious difference in age. The differences are kind of how they're thinking about these populations. So for youth, 15 to 17-year-olds, this is, the grant can serve bits of those population who have got involvement with the criminal justice system, but also people who have dropped out of education. There's also an allowance for youth for people with certain risk factors if they've been kind of referred for various risk factors. So there's like a slightly broader population that the grants can serve if grants are looking at youth or young adults, whereas adults is purely looking at people who have bad current or past involvement with the justice system. Skipping to the next slide. Just looking at who can apply. States, territories, tribal authorities, very obvious. Just a quick note on national or regional authorities. DOL specifies this is not higher education institutions. It can be other non-profits. You can have a national or regional scope, not higher education. And you need 3 sub-grantees that cover like various different geographies. Moving to the next slide. Grant is very heavy on partnerships. So there's partnership requirements across the board. Big one that I'd note here is in the application, you've got to specify your partnership and have an agreement with the state apprenticeship agency. If you're in a DOL Office of Apprenticeship state, you don't have to have a specific agreement with OA. But yeah, it's good to note that they've put that front and center, the agreement with the SAA. Going ahead to the next slide. There's lots of specifics here about how the grants can be structured. I'm not going to go through this in detail here because I want to get to the panel discussion, which is the interesting bit. I think the takeaway here is there's a lot of flexibility on how this funding can be used. So you can use it to cover training costs, you can subsidize wage costs, you could use it as a stipend, you can use it for supportive services, you can use it as incentives for participants. There's, controls, weights and measures on all of those things, but overall there's a lot of flexibility in how you can construct a program with this funding. And then just on the right, we've just looked at the kind of minimum targets in the grant. We're looking at around $5,000 to $7,000 per participant, depending on the size of the grant. And then skipping through the final few slides. So we've just set out some of the details of the grant, some helpful links, application mechanics. There's 4 parts to the application. deadline 15th of April is the important bit. These will be in the slides that we'll send around. And then the final slide before we get into our panel, we just have a note on the scoring. A few quick points. The vast majority, 58 points here, are on project design, methodology, strength of evidence of how the project is going to work. There's also priority points given to registered apprenticeship. And if you can specify partnerships with employers who are apprenticeship sponsors. So again, there's clearly been thinking about how to blend in apprenticeship into the Rio grant structure. Okay, brilliant. That was a really quick overview of how the Restart grants are going to work. With that, I'm really pleased to introduce our panel. So we've got Jeff, Kevin, and Nadine. Actually, I'm going to let you introduce yourselves properly. John, if we could just get everyone up on the spotlight, that would be great. Jeff, you're first up on the spotlight, so we're gonna start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the PT Green program?
Yeah, sure. So good morning, everybody. This is an exciting conversation to have. My name's Jeff Abramowitz. I'm the CEO of the PD Green program. We are a national nonprofit. We do educational tutoring inside prisons and jails across the country and work with individuals on the outside, basically help them get smarter in everything from securing a career credential to getting a GED or high school equivalency or bridging to college. And my experience and what I bring to the table here is a lens not only as an administrator, but also someone that's justice impacted. I spent 5 years in a federal facility after making some horrible choices, being a lawyer a little over 15 years ago. And during that time, I got to really understand some of the challenges that people face, not only behind the walls, but also as they transition home, trying to find not just a job, but that career opportunity. So I'm looking forward to this discussion because there's a lot of things that happen to individuals that travel through the system that we should be aware of as we think about apprenticeships and how we can make them successful.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jeff. Really pleased to have you here. Nadine, can I come to you next, please? Can you tell us a bit about yourself and the Centre for Employment Opportunities and
Of
what brings
course.
you to this area?
Yeah, thanks so much, Harry. It's great to be on today. Thank you for putting together this convening. It's a really exciting opportunity. My name is Nadine Phillips. I am the Senior Policy and Strategy Associate on the Federal Policy team for Center for Employment Opportunities, or CEO. We are the nation's largest reentry employment provider that exclusively serves folks who are coming home after incarceration. We operate across 12 states. We have the capacity to serve up to 10,000 returning individuals every year through our comprehensive evidence-based job training and employment program, which consists of connecting people immediately to the workforce through transitional jobs and then supporting them in credential attainment and finding employment within their communities. And in addition to that, we also provide technical assistance support to other states and providers who are interested in expanding things like their SNAP employment and training programs. So we see firsthand all of the barriers and opportunities that there are in this space, and really excited to talk about the reset grants and apprenticeship in general.
Awesome. Thanks, Nadine. And last but not least, Kevin. Kevin, if you'd like to introduce yourself, tell us a bit about the last mile.
Yep. So my name is Kevin McCracken. I'm the executive director of The Last Mile. We have traditionally offered audio video production and technology training inside prison facilities. We currently operate in 8 states. We have 20 classrooms. And we also are developing our technology to offer our services to other nonprofits and educational organizations inside prisons. We'll be launching a pilot for that in San Quentin's new learning center in May with ARC from California, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Canine Companions, and GRIP, and then on the East Coast with Boston College. So we run a custom Canvas instance that allows us to create our own content and run it like any other university or high school across the country. We are also a partner in the CAP program with Checker, which is the Catalyst Apprenticeship program. offering jobs in organizations like Checker, Lyft, Kihi, and Aramark. So our interest is specifically in finding people career path jobs when they get home. So we also offer a robust reentry program that includes giving every one of our students or anyone that touches our technology a free laptop. Because it's great that Comcast gives away the internet, but we got to get devices in people's hands. So I've been involved in this for 25 years. I had a fair chance employment company in San Francisco that is a $20 million promotional products organization called Social Imprints that hired people with felony records and individuals that have substance use issues. And myself, I spent my 20s bouncing in and out of rehabs, county jails, and hospitals because of my own substance use issues. So this is very personal to me, and I'm really excited to be part of this panel.
Cool. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. I want to kick off with a broad question. Let's start big picture. I just want to talk a bit about the barriers and issues that programs need to address here. So what are the big barriers that these populations face when they're trying to enter the workforce? And what are the interventions that this audience need to be thinking about to combat those barriers? Anyone who wants can jump in. I'm not gonna pick.
So I guess I can kick us off, but there are over 44,000 documented barriers to people coming home. So that's not an easy question to answer. But in the realm of apprenticeships, we really need to be thinking differently. We need to be wearing the glasses of those that men and women that are behind the walls that are coming home. And quite frankly, we need to be thinking about education. Like, how do we get people smarter and prepare them to succeed in these apprenticeships? The reality, as Kevin said, if you don't have a computer and you don't have digital literacy skills and you don't have the math skills that you need and you don't have the writing skills that you need and you don't have the English language skills that you need, then we're setting people up for failure by putting them into these apprenticeships where they're going to be required to get a license or get a certification to pass that test. So the PD Green program does that through tutoring, but there are so many other barriers to apprenticeships and getting in them that we really have to be thinking about the things that we don't see. For example, when you come home, number one priority is getting housing. It's getting back on your feet and getting identification, getting transportation and making it easy for people to get to where they're going for classes, giving them the tools, including clothing and food insecurity and behavioral health supports and all these wraparound supports that we don't even think about, including for women, feminine products. Just wearing different classes. And one of the things that I hope everyone will remember on this call is that we need to be curious and not judgmental when we deal and we start opening and thinking about these programs and really be conscious of all those barriers, including the things people can or can't do. And one of the things, and then I'll be quiet because I know Kevin and Nadine have a lot to say on this, is that, we want to be thinking about can they actually do the job? And we're starting these apprenticeships in some areas. I don't know, in nuclear energy, you're going to need to pass a clearance by some government agency. And I have to believe that there's a background clearance check that's going to be required to get certified in that. Be thinking about can they actually do the job when you start the apprenticeship and then give them the tools to succeed.
I think building off of those points that Jeffrey made, absolutely, there are numerous barriers coming for people who are coming home after incarceration. And it's not for lack of trying. I think that's a really important thing to remember is that we see every day hundreds of people come to CEO because they want to re-engage with the workforce. But as Jeffrey was kind of alluding to, there are a number of immediate barriers to individuals who are trying to find quality employment. And so I think something we need to remember is that first and foremost, they need to have the supports to stabilize. And that means making sure that they have housing, transportation, if they qualify for something like SNAP, making sure they have assistance with their food security. And then again, as Jeffrey has already kind of alluded to, making sure that we are carving out pathways that are actually sustainable and attainable for justice impacted individuals. And that means being more intentional and making sure that we are bringing people along with us when we offer these opportunities, making sure that, if people have been away for a while, they might need some more support in the digital skills space. Making sure that your program is working with somebody's parole or probation officer and acknowledging that they might need to be pulled out of their training at inopportune times in order to address those requirements, or that they may have curfews or what have you, and just being really intentional about all of those pieces I think are really important. And to that end, something we've seen be really impactful as CEO is making sure that people are coming home to income supported services. And so whether that is a paid training or you're having some food assistance through something like SNAP, whether that is cash assistance, I think a lot of people who are not familiar with the justice impacted population forget that a lot of folks are coming home with little or no financial resources and are being asked to get back on their feet and meet a lot of requirements pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think, obviously all of these are important, but I also think there's a massive opportunity for narrative change. Unions have long been friendly to people with criminal records. And I think that really when we look at that opportunity, it's massive. The biggest problem, though, is state licensing. Quite honestly, if you're looking at a job and you want to become licensed in that job, it really depends on what state you live in. I know California has made some great strides because of Newsom around that particular issue, but it's not something that's necessarily readily available in every single state. So I think there needs to be some. I wish the narrative had changed in the last 27 years since I was looking for work with a felony record. Quite honestly, in many ways, it hasn't. And ban the box is great, but it actually doesn't do anything because the fact of the matter is you can still rescind a conditional offer. So, we need to be clear about what we're offering here. We have in the skilled trades especially, we have a huge deficit in skilled ready employees, right? But we also have over 600,000 people coming home each year from federal, state, and county jails, right? So how are we narrating this conversation? I know personally, having done this work for 25 years, individuals that are offered a fair opportunity are some of the best employees I've ever had, including myself. Just honestly, I love the fact that I have the job that I have today. I tell my employees this all the time. I'm grateful for what I have. Over 75% of our employees at the last mile have a criminal record, most of which went through our programming. So they've been in state prisons. We run a tight ship. We continue to expand. We continue to grow. We're going to be offering a prompt engineering and prompt training program inside prison facilities through a simulator in the next few months. We'll be the first ones to actually offer hands-on in that, other than states like Maine that have the internet. We need to be really thoughtful and creative around what we're training, but as well as being thoughtful and creative about how we're changing the narrative. And, I see a lot of commitments from companies, and I'm going to be blunt, I don't see the results, and it's really disappointing. So if you're going to commit to fair chance employment and you're an employer on this call, make that hire. Like, talking about it is great. I love hearing about it. I want to see action. And if you need help on that action, I'm easy to find. I will show you exactly how to do this, precisely how to do it. I've done it for 25 years. So let's kind of stop with the talk and start with the action.
That's a resounding point, Kevin. Thank you. I love that you talk the talk and you're walking the walk. And I just want to highlight a point that Karina made in the sidebar that speaks to what Jeff and Nadine were saying, which is there's a lot we need to focus on. Before you leap into apprenticeship, that supportive service angle, that situations, financial circumstances. There's a whole host of other aspects we need to think about here. I want to dig into one of those, which is more on the personal side, which is kind of trust and previous experience. So, like, often this is a population who've had a bad experience in education, like bad time in school, maybe bad time with other negative experience with other educational employment programs. How do you correct that? How do you build trust with someone? How do you get them in the door again?
Wow. So I'm going to start because this is kind of recent, but I'm in San Francisco, based on the East Coast, but I'm in San Francisco. I was joining Kevin this week and we toured San Quentin. And as we walked through San Quentin, and Kevin's been there for a long time, the men that were there were every just about every person we saw, Kevin, as we walked through the entire facility, was coming up and giving him a handshake, saying hello, and talking to us about how excited they were about education. I mean, it wasn't just this, it just wasn't the people that were there, the residents that were there. It was also the correctional officers. They were excited, actually excited to see us there and talking education and support. It is a way of just changing the culture and getting people to understand that education is the pathway to success when you get out. But oftentimes we leave people out of that discussion and not at that table. And that's unfortunate because employers need to be there. Like this takes a village. We need people thinking about the whole dichotomy from when you walk out, who are the support services that people need, and employers need to be there thinking and understanding, what's involved in doing all this. And I agree, Kevin, it's about action steps now. But my fear is that when an employer realizes that their insurance may go up, when their liability insurance may go up when they're asked a question, do you have anyone that works for you that has a criminal record? And or do you do background checks in your company for your staff? Like those are really practical things that we can't hide behind. We got to be upfront about and say, you need to be aware of this. And culture change takes time, it takes work, it takes education and really getting people buying in. And part of that buy-in starts with the residents inside, the students behind the walls, understanding that they're not being set up for failure, that if we teach them math and how to use a laptop and really start building in the system that that's going to happen. And actually the best people for this, as Kevin said, are people justice impacted. We're super proud that in Maine, we have a full-time employee behind the walls that teaches for us. He's currently serving 10 years and he's getting a full-time salary to support his family in Maine. And he works for us and they give him access to the internet. They give him access to all of our meetings. That's how culture happens because other facilities say, well, we can't do this. Well, no, we can do it. And we are doing it. So I think there's a lot of things that come into play with that. But trust is something you build over time.
I think also a part of that from the workforce reentry angle is first and foremost acknowledging that a lot of folks who are coming from a facility have a new relationship with work. And a lot of these facilities, people are being put to work in more predatory environments. And so just acknowledging that there is a weight behind that where someone might be coming to you and has kind of lost that sense of dignity with work. And so to approach that with care and compassion and eyes wide open and just knowing that there's a different relationship to work with a lot of the folks who are coming home. And I think the second thing that I always emphasize that really helps to build trust is making sure you're being very transparent and setting clear expectations. And whether that's expectations about what it takes to be successful in your program. CEO is a rigorous program. We have people who come to us and aren't ready and they have to come back at a different time. And also setting realistic expectations for the field that you can be successful in given the type of conviction history that you may have. I think that can be the most discouraging part of this process is, individuals who are coming out are really putting themselves out there time and time again. They face a lot of rejection. And so we really try to position them in a place where they can enter the workforce with both eyes sort of wide open and make the best decisions for themselves that are going to put them on the most successful path.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything that was said. And I think I have some personal experience with CEO out here on the West Coast. And I used to teach a resume writing and interview skills workshop in San Quentin before I started working at the Last Mile. And CEO came in to every single employer day we ever had and was there interviewing people. And a couple of the guys got hired immediately, like basically the jobs were waiting for them when they got home. And that kind of trust, like when you can share that track record with other incarcerated individuals that are your students, goes so far, right? And I think beyond that, there's an opportunity. Like we've had people that have graduated our program, gotten home and been disgruntled. It happens, right? We don't feel like we're getting the support we need. I make the time to personally reply to those emails. And, that because it doesn't matter how busy I am. What are my priorities? My number one priority is making sure that our students are supported inside and out so that they can get sustainable careers when they get home. If they're not getting their laptop or they're not getting support from our reentry team, then ultimately whose responsibility is that? I mean, I could sit here and blame an employee for that. Everybody's busy. Everybody's stretched thin. That's the unfortunate facts of nonprofit right now, especially with funding being what it is for any funders out there. Um, but we need to be clear that our priority needs to be the people we're serving, not our egos, not like, oh my gosh, they posted that on LinkedIn. Like, how do we respond to that is the question. And that continues the trust way beyond the walls for us,
Mm.
and so this happened to us this last week. Somebody was not totally happy with the services they were getting. I sent him an email and said, here's my mobile number. What do you need? And all he needed was that email, actually. He replied with, oh, I can see where I wasn't responsive on my end too, And so just getting that acknowledgement, like you're in a difficult situation, we're here to help you. The other thing is that a lot of the information is outdated that they get in prisons. They get a piece of paper with referrals on it that maybe hasn't been updated in a couple of years. They go to these organizations, they have to pay to take a bus there sometimes, and there's like paper
Mm.
on the windows, and they don't exist anymore, right? So I think our obligation when people get home too is to have updated information. I know who the contact is at, for example, CEO. I know who the contact is at PD Green on the East Coast, right? Who we have a partnership with. We know this. We know who to refer people to. And I think that it's our responsibility as people that serve this community to know what the most updated information is, who's giving the best services in every area, whether it's a pass for a bus or clothing or work resources or legal help, whatever it is that we keep updated. So there's a technology lift on that as well that, at some point we're going to need to make.
Thanks, Kevin. Great point. I want to turn now to some of the kind of the practical connections between apprenticeship and restart. And we talked at the beginning about how this administration are bringing together these RIA grants and apprenticeship. I guess my question is why are we even having this conversation? Like, what makes the apprenticeship model a good fit for what you need for reentry?
I'll be honest with you. I went to prison, so I lost my filter when I came home. I'm not convinced that it is. I'm not convinced that it is. I think we need to be really intentional when we get into this game of apprenticeships. But I'll give you a perfect example. In the grant itself, nowhere does it really highlight or mention educational partners. And they want people skilled and into career pathways. But in order to do that, we really need to think about how we help people with digital literacy and make sure they know the math and reading and everything else to support it. I also think there's some other challenges inherent in this game of apprenticeships. And I think part of it is the practical implications of or launching of these projects, which I think we're going to get to as well. But things like data sharing agreements and how do we get data? To prove that we're actually doing well. We have a number of grants we work with the government on. It takes us a year to get a data sharing agreement with the states that we work in. The reason that this is really good, and the truth is that apprenticeships work because they give people the practical skills that they need for not only that job, but that career. And it's real on the job living experience so that they can really learn how to do the task and be successful at it when they get out. So they can work in any welding company or shipbuilding company or all these different trades that are out there. But I have a real fear, quite frankly, that a lot of us are preparing for something that we're preparing people just and setting them up for failure instead of success. So really being mindful of all the pieces that need to come together for a successful apprenticeship is just super important and really takes time to develop and mature. And it really starts with kind of that pre-apprenticeship model as well. And if you're not sure, start a pre-apprenticeship and work into it. Start that pre-apprenticeship behind the walls and then think about, well, how do we transition that out? I call it the and then what. When you do work behind the walls of our prisons and jails, you should be thinking about what happens the second they walk out the door and then what? Like, where do they go to? How do they continue the program? What does it look like for all the wraparound support services? How do we continue to get education to them and all those kinds of things? So I think your question is a good one. But I think the jury is going to be out for a while to figure out, does this really work in the correctional reentry setting? And I pray that it does.
So, Jeff, if I'm playing that back to you, you're saying there's a whole lot you need to work through before you even start thinking about setting up an apprenticeship program for this population. Kevin, Nadine,
Yeah.
what's your
I,
experience of apprenticeship in this space?
I wanted to chime in on that a little bit. I've had pretty positive experiences, but they have been also built on very intentional programming. So one of the things that we've tried to do is we're building out our because we have like new curriculum launching that's being tested in San Quentin right now, which includes a very strong digital literacy piece. We were actually able to build a Google Workspace simulator so that our students are getting real world experience with a tool they will most likely use in their workspace when they get home. If there's any technology at all, it's likely that there's going to be interaction with Google. I mean, that's just how the world works now. The audio video production programming that we built actually was built on a pre-apprenticeship curriculum. So that when apprenticeship opportunities pop up in whether it's video production, audio editing, etc., that we have pre-prepared our students for that. What we haven't done is registered that in California. So we're kind of working on that right now so that it's a clear path, right? And all of the other curriculum that we're currently building has a clear path, whether it's project management, that is curriculum that's approved by the Project Management Institute, or it's sales, where we're going to funnel people to Silicon Valley Academy, SVA, et cetera. We have clear paths to where they can go with this training. And that will be the same as we get into skilled trades. All of it will be the relevant or, instruction for that specific trade or skill so that they're actually on the path that they would be on to the hours they need for an apprenticeship before they even go home. So I agree with Jeff that, I don't know for sure how this is going to pan out, but I do know that we need to offer the preparation while people are still incarcerated, because reentry for us starts the minute someone sits down in one of our seats.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin and Jeffrey. I think it's naive to think that apprenticeship is going to be the silver bullet for all formerly incarcerated individuals and getting them into the workforce. One, because not everyone wants to have a career in an industry that apprenticeships are offered in, and it's not the right fit for everybody. It's a longer duration of training than something that other people might not want. However, I do think there are some aspects to apprenticeship that are really key for engaging the justice impacted population, chief among which being that on-the-job training and having training that includes paid wages is absolutely critical for many populations with high barriers to employment, but especially for individuals who are returning home and need that financial security right away. And that can look like an apprenticeship, but that's also something we should be championing in pre-apprenticeships, in transitional jobs, and other areas of the workforce system where there are opportunities to expand investments in on-the-job and transitional training. And I think the other appealing thing about apprenticeships is a lot of them are in fields that are typically pretty amenable to fair chance hiring. So things like transportation and manufacturing and things like that. CEO, we have one apprenticeship registered in our Colorado offices that's been successful. We've sort of pumped the brakes a little bit on expanding that. So before we can, we want to be able to evaluate sort of how we built out that structure before we can go to some other states. Yeah, I think it's really important to continue to uplift the justice impacted population when we're trying to build investments into things like apprenticeships. And alongside that, we need to make sure that we're bringing the rest of the journey with us. We need to make sure that there are supportive services that are also being addressed in models and in legislation that has to do with apprenticeship.
Okay, so if I was going to sum that discussion up, it would be, maybe there's some bright shoots for apprenticeship and reentry as a model. Great, you get paid wages, but there's a lot of practical challenges and barriers. I want to turn. We've touched on a couple of like industry specific issues. Jeff, I think you mentioned it in the moment. Maybe you're working in an industry where you need a license, and that might be a challenge. Just thinking about the industries in this grant, are there other issues that people should be aware of when you're working with justice impacted populations?
Yeah, sure. So a few. One is when we talk about, I think Kevin mentioned, I mentioned occupational licensing. Obviously, may want to make sure that they can actually do the job, that they can get licensed on it. But then there are a lot of things that happen when individuals leave the prison walls that are that they're required to fulfill. I'll give you an example. Transportation is one of the call outs on this, and which is wonderful. But if you are someone that's just come home and you get your CDL license, when you get that to that Pennsylvania-Ohio border, you're going to need to stop your truck and get out and make a phone call to your parole officer and say, can I continue across? I'm leaving state lines. So you want to be thinking about what restrictions individuals have that are very practical, which could send them actually back in. So many men and women go back inside our prisons because of technical violations. Probation and parole is a really tough thing to navigate. There are check-in calls that they have to abide by. There are travel restrictions often that they have to abide by. There are meetings that they have to cover. There are fines and restitution that they often have to meet. So really think about from the probation side, what are the restrictions? What are the limitations? And then there are things within their court order that they may not be able to do. For example, there are some offenses in this country that people have that do not allow them to work with children or in the area of children or in buildings that have children in them. So it wipes out like an entire sector because you may have an employer that has a building in a daycare center or they have a daycare center there. They may not even be able to get into the building or work in that building. So the bottom line is look at the restrictions that an individual has when they come home. And that's the first piece is kind of understand, is this something that they're going to be able to do and get over some of those hurdles and address them up front, get them cleared in advance. Make sure you're speaking with the probation and parole officers. Make sure that they're abiding by all the terms so they can complete and move on. So I think those are the things that you want on your radar screen. And then just the practical things of transportation. Like if you have a program that takes somebody an hour and a half to get there because they're taking 3 buses to get there, how long do you think that person's going to go into that, stay in that program when they have to do that, every day of the week and they're coming home sometimes at 2, 3 in the morning because the buses don't run so frequently where the plan is. So be thinking of the logistics behind it and does it really make good sense?
Thanks, Jeff. Nadine, Kevin, anything to add?
I think Jeff did a great job summing that up. I was going to say basically the same thing. I think another way to frame that is make sure you have justice impacted voices at the table when you are constructing and exploring these opportunities, because as Jeff was alluding to, there are these quote unquote hidden barriers to a lot of these different opportunities. One example that I think of that we recently explored at CEO was we didn't know that our participants were having such a hard time getting a TWIC card. And for those of you who are like me and grew up in the desert and have no idea what that is, a TWIC card is an additional credential you need to work in and around secure ports. So we were doing things like getting people set up with their CDLs in our New Orleans office. And then they weren't able to apply for a lot of the jobs that worked in and around the port there because they were getting automatically denied because of their conviction. They could go through a redress process, which is largely successful if you make your way through, but takes a lot of time, costs money, a lot of logistics. So a lot of people were just giving up. And I think that's another example of why it's so important to talk to folks who might be navigating these opportunities on the ground, because there are so many potential barriers that we just, we don't know and we don't think about all the time, first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could have stated this better. So, I mean, the fact of the matter is that Jeff called it out at the very beginning of this, like, 44,000 rules and regulations. You just never know what is going to happen. And unfortunately, a lot of times it depends on your parole or probation officer, and it's out of your control. When I was running social imprints, we had parole and probation officers just show up, they wanted to do a UA. They had to do it on the spot. Sometimes we would have customers there. It was embarrassing for our employees to have that happen in front of their coworkers, right? Get pulled out and they would show up sometimes fully geared, like in tactical gear, like basically vest, badge, ready to go, with a sidearm, like really, really intense moments. And so there's like the beyond just the barriers because of the rules. There's also the way the rules are presented and the way that the officers act upon them that is at times totally inhumane. just to be blunt about it. So I think there's a lot of work to do around how we kind of navigate this and what our organizations are in terms of a part in making this an easier path.
There is something, Harry, that can be done and that can change all this. And if everyone on this call, when you go to file your application, think about putting in a position, a paid position for an apprenticeship navigator, so that that person would strictly be working with those individuals to help them get over some of the barriers that they're going to be facing with parole officers, with the court, with the prison system, with their employers, with their just in life. But having that position built into the grant, as well as having like an educational support position built into the grant, are two really easy ways to kind of cure a lot of these things that we're talking about.
Thanks, Jeff. That is a great idea. One final question from me before I open up to questions from the audience. Try and pick up a few other questions in the chat. I want to ask about what's not working. What's the one policy barrier that you'd want fixed here if you had a magic wand?
I'm just going to say post-release supervision. I mean, that barrier, regardless of what state you're in, is a nightmare. And how it's implemented, I mean, there's organizations like Reform that work on that, but it is so haphazard. As Jeffrey and I share a friend in Pennsylvania that was formerly a juvenile lifer, got resentenced, got out, is on lifetime parole. Lifetime parole. That's insane. I mean, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, how are you going to operate in the world you've served your time, you've paid your debt, regardless of what the charges were. If you get released home, how are you going to operate as a human being in this world with lifetime parole restrictions? Right? Like, what is that even? So I think the area that needs the most work is that area. That's the policy, and it is different in every single state. It's different in the feds. It's different in the DOCs. It's different in county. Like, I had a county probation. The guy liked me and let me off early. That was it. I was an easy client. That was why I got off early. No other reason. He's like, I don't need to see you. That's insane. Like, so that would be my biggest policy change is post-release supervision.
And mine would be in background checks. I think that I believe there's a reality that employers need to do background checks, and I understand it, but I think it needs to be a precursor to being hired. We're finding people all around the country that are being hired, and background check comes back a week, a month, 2 weeks late, 2 months later, and they've already started their job and invested in it, and then all of a sudden they're being let go because their background check came back and the employer, was, didn't like what they saw on it. I mean, let's do it up front and be honest about it. If there are things that in your background you cannot do because of whatever reason, then let's accept it and move on and look at occupational licensing laws to change that. But the background checks themselves need to be upfront. And it comes from the reentry side too. Like, people need to be transparent when they come home, and they need to say and own their story and be able to tell it in a way that they're not afraid of hiding something from an employer because of the reaction that they're going to get. And I think that background checks and the background check laws, again, as Kevin said, they vary state by state, city by city sometimes. So understanding like how we can improve that system for employers and for people that are trying to get into the marketplace, I think is really crucial, as well as education across the board for everybody. There you go.
I would definitely second both of those. And I think I would add, one of the main policy issues that we've already talked about on this call is that we're not setting up people with the immediate tools and resources they need to stabilize so that they are in a place where they can successfully participate in and complete an apprenticeship. I think that's one of the main things that we need to look at. And it's not always lawmakers' number one priority because it's not associated with an industry pipeline or an in-demand sector in their community, but those foundational supports and skill building, hard, soft skills, both are really critical to longevity and success in these in the workforce post-release. And I think, when we're thinking about apprenticeship more specifically, and something that this grant does really well is making sure that we are advocating for flexible funding that is learner focused. So loving to see things like the stipends and wages being allowable costs in these grants. I think that's fantastic. Also making sure that we're taking care of our employers who are investing in these kinds of opportunities, making sure that they're able to be supported financially through these grants as well. And Chase mentioned at the top that this is kind of under the broader Rio umbrella. The codification of Rio would be a really great policy move so that we can help secure that funding to be a bit more consistent in the future.
I would also suggest that all these grants should have a digital literacy component to them. Like everyone that's incarcerated or coming home should have access to a laptop. They should get digital literacy skills before they walk outside the door. And I know Kevin's doing a wonderful job at San Quentin, where they already have laptops there. So pretty amazing.
Thanks. So I think, Jeff, I think this grant does actually specifically call out digital literacy, which is great. And yeah, Nadine, as you mentioned, it's really good to see the focus on the kind of employer side. Use it as a stipend, use it to cover wages. I'm going to open up for questions. If anyone would like to come in, please put your hand up. Any questions for the panel, any comments? There's a few points in the sidebar that I'm going to try and pick up as well as we go. But yeah, in the meantime, please put your hands up or put any comments in the chat. We have one specific question for Nadine, which is, can Nadine speak a little bit more about how justice impacted individuals have a different experience with work?
Yeah, sure. I think there's two kind of sides to the coin on this. One is the relationship that I already talked about, which is that sometimes people have been put in situations while they are incarcerated where they are getting very little pay for work. I don't think I have to go into too much of a lecture as to how the racial background that goes into our carceral system. I'll leave that for another time. But there's another side of that coin as well, which is that individuals who are incarcerated do frequently gain a lot of skills while they are incarcerated. And that is something that often goes overlooked, sometimes by the individual themselves. Like sometimes they are not putting value into those skills that they have gained. And sometimes employers aren't putting the same value into those skills as well. So something we always try to do as CEO is make sure that we're talking to people transparently about what have you done inside. Like this might not fit cleanly into a standard box on a resume that you are accustomed to, but we guarantee that you have cultivated skills that are going to be helpful in the workplace. So we really just start to make sure that we are allowing people to, or encouraging them to reframe the way they are thinking about their experience while they have been incarcerated so that they can kind of step forward more confidently upon their reentry.
Thanks, Nadine. Great point. We've got an excellent question. Well, two questions from Maria, which is, what are the strategies that you found to be successful working with employers to help them learn and navigate all of these rules and restrictions and complexities that we've been talking about? Kevin, Jeff, I'm going to turn to you. How do you help employers who are new to this world navigate it?
So I can give you one surefire way. One is bringing people into your space, like bringing people that are justice impacted out to the plant, working with the employer, getting to meet them, see what's going on. And one of the things that we've done at a federal level, and also we're seeing them happen on the state level now, are reentry simulations. These are ways of simulating what it's like to come home from incarceration, and they do it in blocks of time in 15 minutes. I was one of the co-authors of the federal reentry simulation package. And it really gives people the real sense of how frustrating it is to try and get a driver's license, to try and find housing, to try and find a job and fill out a job application. And so reentry simulations are a great way of doing it and involving your employers, having them come out to do it. We do them with the workforce development boards around the country, and we invite employers to those tables. If you ever have a chance to do a reentry simulation, jump on the opportunity, because it will share with you a lot more than what we've just talked about in this webinar about how the challenges really impact people when they come home.
Yeah, I love that. On the reentry side, we employ people that have gone through the process themselves and are there to guide our students that have come home. So I think the biggest thing is that we start early and often inside. As I mentioned it already, the minute somebody sits down in one of our seats, reentry starts, in our opinion. I wish it would start like that for everybody in each facility, given the fact that 96% of people that are currently incarcerated are coming home at some point. It's something that's really, really important to us and something we've keyed in on as far as like navigating all the rules and regulations. The good news is we have employees that actually live in each of the states that we operate in as well. So we do a pretty good job of hiring people that have gone through the system in those states, and then allow them to give their advice and experience to people that have recently come home. We have a RC channel in our Slack. That everyone has access to that's been in any of our classrooms. So there's an open forum, and we do coffee chats twice a week with our returned citizens.
That is great advice. Thank you both. There any final questions or comments? Does anyone want to come in? Okay, brilliant. Well, I think we're going to close it there. Last thing for me to do, I just want to say a massive thank you to our panel. You guys, I mean, you're doing fantastic, amazing work in your day to day, but we really appreciate you coming and taking some time to share with this audience. Some of us in the apprenticeship world, this will be new and different to us. So we really appreciate you sharing your expertise, incredibly valuable. So yeah, thank you
Harry,
for spending the time
Harry,
sharing it.
before we go, Harry, a big shout out and thank you to AFA. You guys are creating this dialogue in this space where change can happen, and just cannot thank you enough for having us at the table because we're often not there, and we appreciate you, and I think everyone on the call appreciates it as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. That's very kind. Um, Jeff, Kevin, Nadine, and Chase at the beginning, thanks very much. We appreciate you. And thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.